welcome to Ray's Sensation. I'm your host, Dan, and in this episode, I am going to be taking a look at the Fantagraphics book, Tower of Shadows. The subtitle is Lost Marvels, #1, Tower of Shadows. This is Marvel Comics reprints. Now, Fantagraphics has done a couple books that the last couple years, which I've reviewed here, that are reprints of the comics that were done for the short couple of years when Marvel was known as Atlas Comics. And to differentiate this book from that series of reprints, I guess, they came up with another title, Lost Marvels, #1, Tower of Shadows. And, so these are things that were published under the title Marvel Comics as opposed to the Atlas. So let's dig in, shall we? All right. So here we've got table of contents, and it talks about, so the Tower of Shadows only ran 10 issues, and the last couple of issues were all reprints. And even some of the earlier issues were mostly reprints. But they had a very short run where they were trying to do something a little bit different with the horror anthologies. A lot of times the horror anthologies were a place where new writers or artists could be tried out without risking a whole book on them. They'd be these short stories. And so you'd see a lot of new artists coming in. The idea behind this was, they might have some new people in here. There are some artists in here who were new at the time or newish, but they were really using some of their top tier guys. And they're starting off here with Steranko. And they have a nice, here's Tour of the Tower by Dr. Michael Dean. Opening panel of Jim Steranko's At the Stroke of Midnight. So it starts off, they actually go through here and write a little bit about every single story in the book. And they have these nice photos. There's two of Steranko. There's Steranko's cover that Marvel turned down because it was too pop art looking. And this, he did the first story for the first issue, and then Stan Lee changed the title, and I won't go into it because they've bothered to write this all up, so I don't want to give away everything. But Stan Lee changed the title and maybe a few other things, minor changes in the story, and that's when Steranko stopped working for Marvel, except for a very few exceptions later on. But he was really kind of pissed off at the time. They have all these nice pictures here. Neil Adams, Big John Buscema, Len Wein, Marv Wolfman, and there's Bernie Wrightson looking so young. All these guys. The great Marie Severin, and Wally Wood looking very Wally Woodish. Barry Windsor Smith and Roy Thomas. And so, like I said, they have a little write-up about every single story that was printed in here in these magazines. Now, this does not. They point out there's two stories that for some reason they couldn't include, including one that they call the masterpiece of this issue is The Terrible Old Man, an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation by Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith. And it doesn't, there was, the reason it's not in these books, there's two Lovecraft adaptations, including one that I really, really was looking forward to seeing again. And they're not included because there was some, well, how does he put it here? Let us note that this is not quite the complete Tower of Shadows. Towards the end of its run, before it changed its name and mission to Creatures on the Loose, occasional reprints from other Atlas titles were added, so those aren't in there. So that makes some issues, they only have one story from that because only one was new. More unfortunately, 2 stories adapted from the work of H.P. Lovecraft, The Terrible Old Men in issue 3, and Pickman's Model, which is the one I really remember fondly, in issue 9, had to be cut at the last minute due to legal questions. Now, I'm not sure what those legal questions could have been. There might have been somebody who was claiming ownership over the H.P. Lovecraft stories back in like 69 and 70. But gosh, those the copyright on those is expired now. And you know, you can tell by the amount of public domain reprints of H.P. Lovecraft out there. So I'm not sure what could have caused them to be excluded. But I'm really upset that they, not really upset. I could track down those individual issues if I really wanted, but I was really hoping they'd be in here. Anyway, I'm taking longer than I wanted on this already. So there's the cover of the first issue. And here's the Steranko. And the old grave digger. Oh, no, his name is Digger is his name, is the name of the, they were going to have their horror host. And that's how Steranko drew this first. And this is really fun. This Steranko here, prime pop art stuff, and this was made into a short film. Somebody had adapted it into a short film, and I bet they kind of used this as a storyboard because it is very cinematic. And then I'm not going to go through the whole issue of the whole book, but the second one is Johnny Craig. And now, when I was reading this, like I said, I was 9, I guess, 9 or 10 when this first issue came out. I didn't know who Johnny Craig was. I hadn't ever seen any EC comics, and I know he had done some art for some of Marvel's superhero books apparently, but not the ones that I was following. So I didn't really know who Johnny Craig was. But it looks, as he points out here, this looks like John Romita. And John's not credited anywhere here. But it definitely looks like he might have had a hand in this. There's the now this character Digger that they have for their horror host is only in for like I think he's only in 2 issues, and then he's abandoned, as we'll get to later. Here's the issue 2, and this one was a highlight to me when I was a kid because of Neil Adams' story in here. Now, even as a kid, the payoff of this story felt a little weak, but it is a creepy little monster. Maybe not the scariest monster you can imagine, and the art is great. I won't give away the ending. But it kind of haunted me. Even though, like I said, even as a kid, the ending, I was going like, I could have gotten away from that monster. But for some reason, it really stuck with me. And then, let's see here. Oh, I guess I'm going to... Then we go to issue 3. There's the Gravedigger still on the cover. But the horror host for this one is... what does it say here? Headstone R. Gravely. What a convoluted name for that character. But he doesn't last, because then the very next story in this issue 3. Now, from this point on, I think there's a couple stories that don't have a narrator at all, but from this point on, any narrators you see are generally caricatures of either the artist or the writer of the story. And this one's here. Hi, Monster Buffs. Groovy Gary here. And so that's Gary Friedrich, who wrote the story, appearing as the horror host. Let's see here. Got another. And then here's issue 4. And this has Don Heck art. And Don Heck's a character who I didn't like when he did the art on, I wasn't following a lot of comics, but the comics I was following, I was very artist-oriented, really. And whenever Don Heck would show up to fill in for an issue and the regular artist got behind or something, I was not happy. There's Don's. But I did like this one. This monster looks like like one of the creatures from Pre-Code Monsters crossed with Kirby. Well, I mean, Kirby did Pre-Code Monsters, but he didn't usually do creepy ones like this. So that's kind of fun. And this one's based on bad wordplay for the twist ending, the surprise ending. Let's see what else here. We're getting there, folks. Oh, here's this is funny too. This Tom Sutton art in here is very, very cartoony. He does another one later too in one of the other issues, but it's funny that they had such, cool art, but very different from the rest of the tone of the magazine. Here we go. This I think this issue was published in 1970, the same year as the first issue of Conan. And here's a caricature of, I guess that's supposed to be Barry Smith. Doesn't really look like the picture they have of him in the front there. But this early Barry Smith art, of course, it has a lot of Steranko and Kirby looks to it, but this woman especially, that looks right out of Steranko. But really cool art. Really cool art. A lot of fun. Oh, and here were this stuff here. Wally Wood, of course, from EC. But I hadn't seen any EC reprints at the time. And living in rural Pennsylvania, I wasn't running across used copy of EC stuff. And the area where I grew up in was very much part of that. Even in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, when I was really into comics, people really had that whole anti-comic feel. Comics were trash. Newspaper comics were okay, but comic books, unless it was Mickey Mouse or something, they were all trash and horrible for you and this and that. And so, but I was a big Sword and Sorcery fan. Of course, Hal Foster, who did Prince Valiant, was somebody who Wally Wood swiped from all the time. And I didn't know Hal Foster either. I knew his name from Prince Valiant, but he was not the artist when I was a kid. I didn't see the Sunday papers and see the Prince Valiant strips very often. And it always seemed to me that it was more like about court intrigue or even romance in some of the strips I used to see when I was a kid. But again, I didn't see it that often. It wasn't until 70s or 80s that I saw some Prince Valiant reprints that Hal Foster had done, and I was going like, oh, this is why everybody was ripping him off. But anyway, that being said, I loved this kind of stuff. I loved Wally Wood's work in this comic, and also he did Sword and Sorcery comics for Warren magazines that were really cool, very cynical, downbeat. the heroes were often not very heroic. So Wally Wood, of course, did a bunch of stuff for Wit's End and the Wizard King. Good stuff. And Sid Shores, I wasn't familiar with either. I'm still not really that familiar with Sid Shores because he didn't draw a lot of comics that I was interested in. I do like this artwork, though. I think this is pretty cool. And, that's a, great panel there. There's some good stuff there. Another Wally Wood one. Great monster. I love me a monster. What am I up to here? I've been flipping past the covers. I was going to originally go by covers, but you're getting it all in one book if you're buying this. So this cover is I can't remember in here in the beginning. In the introduction, it says somebody took an old Kirby cover and just added some things to it. But this is an old monster cover Kirby had done like a decade earlier, reworked. And there's the second of the 3 Barry Smith stories. Like I said, the third one didn't get reprinted. Nice. And there, and here, this is I didn't know it. Later, one of the most famous Hal Foster things is the Battle on the Bridge. And that Wally Wood himself has ripped off that scene for several of his comics. And here's another homage to that. It's a cool one. And then here at the end, this is, there was only one new comic in this issue, and one new story in this issue, and that's the H.P. Lovecraft Pickman's Model that they couldn't reprint in here. So they have the cover there, and then they did one of these, they did an all reprint king size special, reused issue 2's cover and reprinted 6. So anyway, and here's a little bit about the little tiny biographies of everyone. Anyway, that's a quick look at that. Sorry if I skipped past somebody you really wanted to see their artwork, but I didn't want to do a really long one on this. Just a quick overview. So I really had been thinking, like, some of the Atlas ones. I mean, I can't afford all the stuff that Fantagraphics has been doing because I'm getting a lot of other stuff, too. So when I was pre-ordering stuff, I did not pre-order the Atlas War Comics, the Atlas Romance, or the Atlas Crime Comics. Now, the thing about those volumes is I know absolutely there's going to be great artwork in there that I would love. But those aren't genres I typically enjoy the stories of, so I'm thinking I might not get them. I haven't pre-ordered them. And there's one thing that in the other series they're doing, the Atlas Creator Collections, the kind of oversized ones, like this one here, the Joe Maneely one. They were supposedly going to do a Bill Everett one like this of his horror comics, which, wow, I'm so excited for that, or I was so excited for that. My pre-order was canceled, and they don't have a new date announced, or at least they didn't the other day. By now, actually, but maybe yesterday even, it's been put back up. I hope it was just being delayed for some reason, or there's some changes that had to be made. I'm not really sure, but that's one I really want to get. Like I said, they're They're putting out a lot of stuff. Anyway, let me know in the comments below if you think I'm making a mistake with any of those three I've said I'm not going to pre-order. It probably wouldn't take too much to convince me to get them. Oh yeah, like, comment, and subscribe, and hopefully I'll get another video up soon. All right, bye.